I'm John Strum, and this is Real Talk MS. It's July 23rd, and we have a lot to talk about. And in this episode, we also have a lot to think about, because this week, we're talking about the impact that digital technology has had on diagnosing and treating multiple sclerosis. When you think about it, it's difficult to come up with any area of our lives that hasn't been transformed by digital technology. And I realize that when it comes to some areas of our lives, we can probably debate whether that impact has been positive or negative. But I think digital technology has had a profound and positive impact on diagnosing and treating MS. And over the next few years, we may be on the cusp of seeing emerging technologies like artificial intelligence provide the most transformational impact on all areas of healthcare. This week, Dr. Riley Bove joins me to discuss the role that digital technology already plays in the diagnosis and treatment of MS, and to share a preview of what's coming next. Dr. Bove is a neurologist and associate professor of neurology at the University of California, San Francisco, and I think she's the perfect guest to share some of the ways that technology is changing the game when it comes to treating people living with MS. But before we get to my conversation with Dr. Riley Bove, there are a few other things that you should know about. This past week, the National MS Society announced the appointment of Dr. Tim Cutsey as its new president and CEO. If you're a regular listener, you may recall that the MS Society's previous president and CEO, Cindy Zagiboilo, has retired, and following a nationwide search, the Society's board of directors voted unanimously to appoint Dr. Cutsey to the role, with the MS Society's board chair, Peter Perino, commenting, and I'll quote now, "Tim is a trusted voice of the global MS community, a highly respected scientist, and we are excited for him to bring his transformative leadership to drive us into our next era to achieve a world free of MS." End quote. The appointment to president and CEO caps Dr. Cutsey's 24-year career with the National MS Society, where he most recently served as the Society's Chief Advocacy, Services, and Science Officer. Dr. Cutsey has fostered global collaboration with MS organizations and scientific leaders around the world, leading to the creation of the International Progressive MS Alliance, a one-of-a-kind global research network aimed at accelerating the development of new, effective treatments for progressive MS, as well as the Pathways to Cures roadmap, a plan that aligns worldwide resources and research to help accelerate discoveries and ultimately find cures for MS. If you're a regular listener, you've heard Tim Cutsey join me on this podcast many times, making his first guest appearance almost 7 years ago in episode number 4 of Real Talk MS. And I'll just say that I could not agree more wholeheartedly with the MS Society's board's selection. They have, without a doubt, chosen the most qualified and capable candidate to lead the National MS Society into the future. If you'd like to hear more about Tim's vision for the Society and the initial priorities that he'll be focusing on, I hope you'll join me next week when the National MS Society's new president and CEO, Dr. Tim Cutsey, will be my guest. Frexalimab is an investigational antibody being developed by Sanofi, and nearly 1 year of data from the Frexalimab phase 2 clinical trial and its open-label extension study show that among people with relapsing remitting MS or secondary progressive MS with relapses, treatment with Frexalimab resulted in a reduction in active and new or enlarging lesions. Treatment with Frexalimab also significantly reduced blood levels of neurofilament light chain, which is a biomarker of nerve cell damage that's typically elevated in people with MS. Now, if you're a bit of a science geek like me, I'll mention that Frexalimab is a next-generation anti-CD40L antibody. It inhibits activity in the CD40-CD40L pathway, which is a key pathway for activating immune cells in the body. This antibody controls MS inflammation without reducing the number of white blood cells or causing blood clots, which was a serious side effect of earlier anti-CD40L inhibitors. The Phase 2 clinical trial is evaluating the safety and efficacy of 2 different doses of Frexalimab against a placebo. The trial involves 129 adults with relapsing forms of MS, and in an open-label extension study, the significant benefits derived from Frexalimab were sustained for the entire 48 weeks of that open-label extension study. This encouraging news, demonstrating a significant reduction in lesion volume and activity while also suggesting less nerve cell damage, has cleared the way for the Phase 3 clinical trial for Frexalimab. We'll keep you updated as Sanofi shares additional news about this potential disease-modifying therapy. In last week's episode of the podcast, I told you about the Federal Trade Commission's report on pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs. If you missed last week's episode, I'll invite you to check out episode number 359 of Real Talk MS, and I'll include a link to that episode in today's show notes. But to give you a quick overview, if you take any prescription medication, then you might want to understand how these multi-billion-dollar companies that most people don't even know exist determine how much you're going to pay for those medications. The 6 largest PBMs control pricing for 94% of the prescription drugs in the United States. And based on the findings outlined in its 73-page report, the Federal Trade Commission is now planning to file a lawsuit against the 3 largest pharmacy benefit managers, including United Health Group's Optum Rx, CVS Health's Caremark, and Cigna's Express Scripts, for their highly questionable business practices in setting drug prices. And yes, all 3 of these companies are not so coincidentally owned by or associated with health insurance companies. For the longest time, I've believed that we really can't fix the high price of prescription medications until we can see the entire supply chain. Pharmacy benefit managers hold enormous influence on how much each of us pays for those prescription medications. Yet they've long labored in the shadows with no public scrutiny. The FTC's report and subsequent lawsuit are clear indicators that all that's about to change, and you can be sure that we'll keep you updated as this lawsuit moves forward. I don't think I've ever come across anyone who's told me that they looked forward to an MRI exam. Rather than being something to look forward to, I think an MRI scan is something that's tolerated at best. And for a lot of people, that MRI scan is a sometimes frightening and frequently anxiety-producing event. This is particularly unfortunate because getting an annual MRI scan is often a part of a standard MS treatment plan. So what can you do if you're one of those folks who feels a certain amount of dread when it comes to getting that MRI exam? Well, one of my listeners, Pras Tilakaratna, suffers from claustrophobia. And Pras was terrified of getting into that narrow tube. Pras chose to learn more about MRI. In fact, Pras found ways to practice for their MRI exam at home, and that practice made it possible for them to follow through with that important exam. Recognizing that there were others who might consider putting off an MRI exam rather than going through with it, Pras created a website that's designed to help anyone overcome their fear of having an MRI exam. The site may appear to be incredibly simple, but don't let that put you off. I think it is absolutely masterful in providing the kind of information, even practice videos, that can tamp down that fear and get you ready for an MRI exam. So if you're a little squeamish about that upcoming MRI exam, I hope you'll visit happymri.com, and you'll find that link in today's show notes. We're just a few days away from Crush MS, an event that combines wine, food, music, and fun in Napa Valley, California, to raise money for MS research. Crush MS takes place this Saturday, July 27th, at Reed Family Vineyards in the Napa Valley. I'll be there, and if you think you might enjoy a summer afternoon in California's wine country, enjoying great wine from over a dozen Napa Valley wineries, amazing food, and live music, I hope you'll make plans to join me. For more information or to buy your tickets, just visit crushms.org, and you'll find that link in today's show notes. As you use your desktop computer, tablet, or phone to visit crushms.org, or any of the 400 million websites that are available on the interwebs, you might take a moment to reflect on how digital technology has given us tools that have revolutionized business, education, healthcare, not to mention the mundane activities of our daily lives, like viewing cat videos. But today we're talking about a subject that is way, way bigger than cat videos. In a moment, Dr. Riley Bove joins me to look at how digital technology has already become a game changer in diagnosing and treating MS, and to give us some hints about what future technologies may lie ahead. It's hard to imagine even a single area of our lives that hasn't been changed by digital technology. The pace of scientific discovery has never been as rapid as it is today, and those advances have given healthcare providers new tools to inform treatment decisions and monitor MS disease activity. At the same time, people living with MS have new ways to track how they're doing, to communicate with their healthcare providers, and to access support. Joining me to discuss how digital technology is changing the game when it comes to diagnosing, treating, and managing MS is Dr. Riley Bove. Dr. Bove is a neurologist and an associate professor of neurology at the University of California, San Francisco. Welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Bove.
Hi there, John. Thanks so much for having me.
I always like to first get our definitions out of the way. So, how would you define digital health, and what are some examples of digital health technologies?
Yeah, great question. I think there's been such a expansion of conversation around digital health that it can be helpful to just kind of streamline it to a few key areas relevant to MS. So I think it's really the use of tools and technology to improve care and research in a few really key ways. So way number one is just improving communication between the patient and their care team. So that might be telehealth, so that the physician or the physical therapist can see the patient in their home environment and expand the reach of the clinic. It can also be something like home blood pressure monitoring, and so that the care team can kind of keep track of someone's blood pressure or other function between in-clinic visits. A second key area is really around monitoring of function. And so that can be monitoring of gait through wearables, or of mood through questionnaires. And that can be both for the care team to monitor a patient's function, and also for a person's self-management, self-monitoring. So I think a third key area is really around an individual's and their home life self-management, either monitoring how they're doing and kind of titrating, setting goals, things like that, or self-treatment, treating sleeps, treating cognitive concerns, using apps, online apps, downloadable apps, etc. And then the frontier bit, where we're really kind of going into the future, is the use of artificial intelligence to augment probably all the things I just discussed, and to, innovate and change healthcare in a number of other ways as well. Whether that's sort of better interpretation of a person's MRIs, better interpretation of someone's speech to understand their top concerns, we'll see.
Well, let's talk about how digital health tools can impact managing or monitoring MS. For instance, can digital health tools help track MS progression?
Yeah, great question. So I think that what we've really seen from 10 or 15 years of research here is that we do see subtle changes in function, whether that's in step count using a commercial wearable, monitor, or in cognition using specific cognitive tools, or in other domains of someone's life over time. And we can see these changes actually before a doctor can see them. And so it really brings to light that what we're calling silent or deaf progression, subtle progression independent of relapses, so that we can really pick up changes sooner and hopefully act on them.
Someone living with MS may only see their neurologist every 6 months. And when their neurologist asks them how they're doing, well, it can be hard to recall things that may have happened 4, 5, or 6 months ago. Are there digital tools that can make this easier?
Yeah, great question. And it's absolutely true. By the time someone gets to our clinic, they are just so wiped out from, getting to us and parking and getting their insurance card out and getting through all these different, sort of barriers that kind of, happens to me too. Your kind of mind goes blank about what happened 5 months ago, right? So, absolutely, people can self-monitor their function, whether that's their mood, their bladder function, their sleep, using any number of tools. Actually, a simple way is just to keep a diary on your phone. Set a reminder every day and just write down what was notable, or have a little spreadsheet on your phone. There's also specific apps that have been built around this. So there's a number of apps, and they kind of come and go a little bit. And so, but downloadable apps for MS self-monitoring, we built an open access free version called Open MS Bioscreen that people can create as an app or just access online, where they can just track these things and show them to their doctor. Hey, oh yeah, this was the fall. This was the context. Maybe I fall at dusk because of vision, right? Maybe I fall in the middle of the night because I'm rushing to go to the bathroom. That context is missing when we try to recall something, that happened months ago. And that's something that people can really write down and track as they go.
Well, while we're talking about apps, are there other smartphone apps that people with MS can use? And how does someone know which apps are going to be right for them?
Great. Yeah. So there's, as we know, in MS, no two people with MS are the same. Everybody has their own constellation of lesions, their own constellation of symptoms, their own abilities and difficulties. And so because of that, I think it's really being smart about what apps you want, and which ones are going to, be usable to you. So if you're someone who really likes to have everything in one place, you want to download quite a comprehensive app where you can monitor all your function and do tests and all kinds of things, then, that would be the right approach for you. If you're someone who has a very, very busy life and you want to just, treat one symptom at a time, really deep dive into one thing at a time, you might think about a specific app around sleep or mood or any other symptom and really drill down just on that. And so I think, just like no people with MS, no two people with MS are alike, there's a no one size fits all. It's really about what's usable and feasible for each person. Mm-hmm.
Well, digital technology isn't only available through your smartphone. A smart watch can count your steps, track your activity levels, and even track your sleep. Can all this information that a smartwatch can so easily track for you, can that tell us anything about an individual's MS?
Yeah. So I have to state a huge preference for some of these passive tools. And I really appreciate you asking that, John, because whatever requires less effort on the person is going to be what they're going to stick to longer. Okay. And then that's going to provide more information, and it's going to allow us to make change that supports the person. And so something that is worn on the wrist or is going to be something that can be charged. You have to charge it and maintain it, but pretty much you don't have to think about it all day. And these wearables really give us really important information about someone's walking, about someone's sleep, about someone's real world participation. So someone may be able to walk really far, but maybe they're only doing that on weekends, right? So then that gives you information about, hey, can we increase your daytime, your weekday activity as well, 1 or 2 days a week? Or we may see that they're waking up, they go to bed at a reasonable time, but then they're waking up many, many times during the night because they have to go to the bathroom or because there's pain or spasticity, spasms, things like that. And so this information is hugely valuable to understanding how someone is doing in their daily life. And we may see that people are able to walk really far and have really good function, but they're not leaving their home because they have depression. And really, if we want to improve their activity and their overall well-being, we have to tackle the depression. And so each of these a simple watch can give us information, really valuable information across a number of these domains. So I think this is a really, really helpful way to go. Provided that patients can really access the interpretation of the information, and also they can share it with their doctor or their clinical team.
Which brings me to my very next question. Given the value of this information, what's the easiest way for someone to share this kind of data with their care team?
Yeah, this is where the field has really fallen short. So there's all this information that the patient can access. And then just think about the, physician, the neurologist or the physical therapist whose first patient has a Fitbit and the next patient has an Active Watch and the next patient has an Apple Watch. And, you're trying to navigate all the passwords and all the stuff to try to make sense of the information, right? So the field hasn't done a great job of making this really digestible and shareable with the care team. It is feasible. And I think in the long term, the solution has to be what we call APIs, or kind of like connector web sites that kind of can connect the information from these wearables to the doctor's medical record so that they can see it live when they see their patient. That said, in the meantime, if you do have one of these watches, being able to maybe extract a PDF from your app, or at least screenshot it so that when you come into your doctor's office, or your physical therapist's office, your care team, you have sort of something that's displayed really simply, so that you're not, sort of fuddling around with passwords or things, or like, Wi-Fi connectivity, oh shoot, it took too long to try to connect, and now we've just got to move on to your labs type thing. Being able to come in with a nice printout or a nice, screenshot or something, I think will really help make this information useful for your physician. And also asking your care team to tell you, hey, what is a reasonable step count goal for me? Maybe I can't walk 10,000 steps a day, but maybe I could be walking more than I am. What is reasonable for someone with my level of MS-related walking impairment, right? I think those are questions that people can ask their care team, and we should start really being able to provide evidence-based information there.
Many people perceive the risk of using any digital tool as the potential loss of privacy. When it comes to digital health tools, how can people feel comfortable or confident that their personal information is being kept private?
That's a great question. And I think this is a real risk, right? We just saw, a big leak with 23andMe. We do hear about occasional leaks, even when data should be quite secure. So that's one risk. And then the second risk is that data somehow, there's sort of like, perhaps sort of under the radar ways that data could be sold to pharmaceutical companies or to other people who are going to profit from your information. And so really, and sometimes those companies can generate really valuable insight and treatments, right? So really thinking about how this is done, reading the fine print, going back to the fine print maybe every 6 months to see what's changed. And then also one kind of just simple trick can be creating what we call dummy email addresses for different apps or different devices, so that you don't have one email address that's connecting all of them.
Since we're discussing how digital technology can potentially transform MS care, can you give us a preview of what you're currently working on?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I think one area that we really need more information on is, we know that televideo care happens and can reduce those rural urban divides and can expedite access to care. We saw that during the pandemic, for instance, but we really, in order to really support it in the long term, we need to understand its long-term effects in terms of costs, in terms of clinical efficacy, in terms of the patient-doctor or patient care team relationship and satisfaction. And so we do have a NIH-funded trial with Marissa McGinley at the Cleveland Clinic, where we're really looking at televideo long-term in a randomized controlled way. Dr. Val Block is a collaborator in our group who is, we're working hard to understand how not to just monitor walking, which is fairly easy to monitor, but bladder function, which is one of those invisible symptoms that really affects the lives of people with MS. And can we give people information about when their bladder is full and they should get to the bathroom, or when they didn't fully void and they need to go back and try to clear, so that they can get out of the house and live their best lives. That's another area that I'm really excited about. And then, of course, this sort of like AI bit, chat GPT bit that's kind of, all over the place. We're definitely applying that to different models of looking at patients' speech and looking at medical records to really understand, if we can understand from a health system perspective, how people are doing.
When you think about how digital technology has already impacted the practice of medicine, and you look at the transformational potential that the next generation of digital health tools could deliver, what excites you the most?
Yeah. The first thing that I'm really excited about is actually being able to bring all of this cool stuff to the point of care. Like that thing about that divide between all of the tools that are facing the patients, and then like not having the care team able to access them. I think that's something that's like a technical and a logistical barrier, but once we really plow through that, I think we'll really be able to use the full spectrum of what's available. The other thing is, so far, digital tools have really been built by developers without really thinking about the humans who have to use them, right? And so human-centered design is something that's well known in the design world, but in the health technology world, we're only finally catching up. And so what I'm really excited about seeing is in the next generation of tools, things that aren't just kind of like trying to take a paper and pencil test and make it digital, but rather trying to see, how does the person live in their own environment? How can we capture things that, as simply as possible for patients, their speech, their movement, in a simple way as possible, in a patient-centered way as possible, and as realistic way as possible. And I think that is where tech has to go, so that we're not, being burdensome on patients and asking them to do clunky things, but rather just being able to get a little quick snapshot as simply as possible. And then the final thing is just self-management. We've seen that some tools can improve processing speed in people living with MS. We've seen that some tools can improve exercise, sort of what we call, adherence, like sticking to exercise programs and improving. And tools can improve mood. So really seeing this expansion of tools that people can access in their own homes to rehab in their own speed, so that we can really make progress towards improving function. I'm really excited about that as well.
Well, Dr. Riley Bove, I want to thank you for all you do through your research and in the clinic to improve the lives of people living with MS. And thanks so much for talking with me today.
Thanks so much, John.
That's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. Real Talk MS is powered by the National MS Society. And you can share this episode of the podcast by letting your friends or family members know that all they have to do is point their web browser at realtalkms.com/360. You'll find that link in today's show notes, so you can easily copy and paste it right into an email or a text. I hope you'll join me next week when you'll meet the new president and CEO of the National MS Society and a longtime friend of this podcast, Dr. Tim Cutsey. I'll be talking with Tim about his vision for the National MS Society and what some of his initial priorities are going to be. In the meantime, I hope you'll pay a visit to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Real Talk MS app for your iOS or Android smartphone or tablet. It's the best way for us to stay connected. The app will automatically download the latest episode of Real Talk MS. You'll be able to access any of our past episodes. You'll be able to save your favorite episodes. And it's a great way for me to share bonus content with you. The app is free, so I hope you'll download it today. I'm John Strum. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and make healthy choices.